Eric, you described in your introduction that it was a couple of years ago when you started thinking about this material and reached out to Lili. You described that it was a kind of low moment in your life, and I'm wondering what you were hoping to achieve by handing this material over to Lili and how it came out.
Well, I had no idea really what it would turn out to be, because I couldn't remember most of it at that point. And it seemed like a long time ago, and there was a lot milling around about all this information that we had, and I felt like at that time in my life, and it was a couple of years ago, but it just seemed to be time to bring this to a head, really. And like I said earlier, the only person I could trust to do it properly was Lili. And so we set to work, and I realized that I had to sort of carry the bill for this. So I took possession of the whole lot, and I asked Lil to finish this and to make it into something that was a good movie, just for its own sake. And I stepped back and let her get on with it. And I didn't have much really to do, although I'm supposedly a producer of this thing. I just let it happen. So.
Well, you lived it.
Yeah, and it all seems like a long time ago, and it was. It's quite disturbing to sit and watch this with all of you guys, because I feel like I've got no clothes on, you know. And but in a way, I think that's good, but it's still difficult to see myself like that in some of the states I was in.
Well, you really get a real sense of you as a survivor in this film.
Yeah, I'm still here. It's been about 30 years since I picked up a drink, and none of this would be possible. I didn't think I'd make it past the age of 30, and now I've been 30 years sober, and so I'm pretty proud of that. But I couldn't have done it without help, and that's why Lili's here, and that's why a lot of people around the world are friends of mine because of this sobriety thing, and I'm very grateful. You know.
So, Lili, I described in my introduction that I think you two met when you were directing the film Rush, and you recruited Eric to do the score for it. And can you talk about the contacts that you've had over the years, or how Eric came to trust you to do this?
Well, we've been friends since we worked together, but and I think that there was a basis of trust in our relationship. But this is a journey that's so different than your friendship, because in normal context, we would never go down these roads, and I would never question a friend about any of these things, really. So it gave me a responsibility that I wanted, and I kept saying this to Eric, I want to do right by you, which wasn't to whitewash anything, but to make the movie that was his life, try not to pass judgment, and lay it all out there. And I had that opportunity, and that, of course, is a much deeper level friendship than we had had the 25 years before.
Can you talk about the process of doing the interviews that form the bedrock of this film?
Well, very early on, I made the decision that there would be no talking heads. It was partly inspired by a movie that I was very impressed with, Listen to Me, Marlon, and which I gave to Eric, and he was excited about too. So the idea was no talking heads, and none of that feeling of behind the music, which as an aside, I always think are really bad ideas if you're trying to get some young person not to do drugs. Because some 70-year-old sitting there telling you about all the experience he's had, and then they found me in the alley with the needle, and he's like alive looking okay. So I always think, well, that wasn't that smart for teenagers. Anyway, on a different note. So that was the idea. No talking heads. Everybody to see everybody in the time that that we're showing. And the interviews were with Eric. I didn't do a lot of interviews. There were certain key people that kept giving me. So before I started, I would have imagined, oh, I have to talk to all these people, but it didn't work that way. I would do an interview and it would take me down a path. So I didn't know what story I was telling beforehand. But with Eric, we just had sound in a room at one of his homes in London or in the country, and we wouldn't have these marathon sessions. They'd be about 2 hours. And I didn't usually go with a plan unless I hadn't done an interview where somebody had brought up something. But that's where so much of the richness of this comes from, are in those conversations where Eric was so truthful and so open.
Well, you go to some dark places here, and I wonder what it was like for you to ask a friend about those tough times.
Well, it was a little bit like the movie in that we didn't start at the dark places. So by the time we kind of got to those, it was like you're watching the movie. You get to know Eric better. You understand his path in a way, or his demons. And so it was a lot more like that.
Eric, there is this idea which comes up in the film, you've got to live the blues, to play the blues. And I wonder if that gets over-romanticized in a way. We know that in the music world, in the jazz world, in the blues world, there can be a mythology around drugs, and I wonder what's your perspective on that idea that you have to live the blues to play the blues.
I think it is a myth, but I was too young to really understand that. It seemed that all of the musicians and musical heroes I had seemed to be on drugs or drunk, you know, and a lot of those guys did lead that kind of life. So a lot of my early heroes from way back, most of them died tragically, and so I just assumed that was part of what, you know, that's what you had to do. And I honestly think that you can get drunk and play and record and think that it's fantastic, and then the next morning you wake up and listen to it back, and it's dreadful. So there is a lot of disparity about that, but I think you can only get to the realization of that with maturity, or maybe you've got to go through it to get through it. You know, later on I realized that it was actually a lot easier and nicer to make music without all that stuff. But at the time, and in fact it got in the way a lot, because the lifestyle became the thing instead of the music, and one sort of overtook the other. So I think it is a myth, yeah, and it's actually quite ugly for me to see myself, you know, and I've seen a lot of people like that. During the 70s, for instance, it seemed to be the thing, but maybe now it's not so much like that. I hope not, anyway.
Well, it does seem to be part of this film a willingness to show that, to show the bad times along with the good, and you know, and I wonder what kind of conversations, if any, you had between the two of you about doing that.
No, we didn't really. I think one of the things that Eric knew is that it wasn't I couldn't do some fluffy thing. That's why he asked me. And he knew that just from the experience with Rush, that I wouldn't know how to do that. So we never had real conversations about what wouldn't be in the movie. He really gave me free rein to make the movie. And when I was watching the movie again tonight, aside from his life story, one of the great contributions he gave me was the idea of using Gustavo Santaolalla to do the score. It's so seamless, and this was an idea Eric had very early, and I think it's so moving. And every time I see the movie, I'm so struck by how well that works.
So, Eric, you said that there are periods of your life that you don't remember. When you watched this film for the first time, what stood out to you?
Well, obviously the dramatic parts are really difficult. I mean, I don't ever remember anyone filming me while I put cocaine up my nose. I mean, that's quite a shock to see. And I think, well, it was someone over there on my right-hand side, and I still can't remember who it was, but to watch myself go through that and to put other people through it with me, I mean, and some of those people, you know, that are still alive are my dearest friends, and we stay in touch. So I think what's great about the movie and the story is that I've got through it, and I've still got something. I've kind of paid back and made amends to some of those people, and it's got a happy ending. But the bits that get me are seeing myself. That's really the hardest part and the most intriguing part, that I got to that. And I got to that stage and still managed to come through and be where I am.
Something that's wonderful in this film is to hear the voice of your mother, Rose Clapp, who raised you, and I wonder where that recording came from.
That was some old BBC interview that had been done years ago, and that is one of the things that's so interesting, because when we started, there had been archivists and friends of Eric's putting things together, but that is just like the tip of the iceberg, how much digging is required to do something like this, particularly because you don't have talking heads, so you require a lot more screen time for things. So anything you found like that, that was a known interview. But his aunt, Sylvia, for example, was an interview I went and did, and she was just full of information. And so Ben Palmer ended up being almost the narrator of the movie, because he was so insightful about Eric and the different times in his life and things that you don't expect like that. I didn't know that Ben Palmer would be so important to me making this movie. So you just go down the roads, and I didn't have a concept that I wanted to back into. I really wanted it to be a journey.
But Lili, you have this long list of credits working in fiction films, and I wonder how that experience applied to this film, and then what was new for you having to take on the role of a documentary maker.
Well, I think in all art, you're trying to get to some truth, even in a movie. I mean, when you make a movie, that's what an actor is trying to portray, some truth. So I think that runs through everything. That's very important to me. But it's all different muscles than making a movie, because you have none of the things that protect you. You don't have a script. You don't have a DP to guarantee what your film's going to look like. You don't have a schedule. You don't have any of the safety things in place that you do, and you have no money, really, comparative to a movie. So it's entirely different. In a lot of ways, it's far more creative.
Eric, this film begins with B.B. King and ends with B.B. King. And I'd love to hear you elaborate on more about your relationship with B.B. King.
Well, I met B.B. in the 60s, and we became instant friends, and I saw a lot of him from then on, and we became even better friends, and we played a lot together, and every time I saw him, you know, it was like it got deeper and deeper. But towards the end, you know, it was really difficult, because I knew he was in trouble financially, and I didn't know how to handle that, and then, you know, when he passed, there was a lot of controversy, and it was difficult to stand back and not take part as much as I'd like to have done in in getting involved with all of the aftermath of that. But the whole thing came down to music, really. That, I mean, as I said in the beginning, I really didn't know where all this stuff was coming from, and I didn't know that he'd turn out to be the #1 man. You know, it's still incredibly powerful for me to hear him sing on the early records, to hear him play when he was playing guitars with very thick strings and bending those notes, and the style he had, and the polish he had, and the depth. I mean, just about epitomized the whole thing, and I was very privileged to be able to get to know him, play with him as much as I did.
Well, we feel very privileged to be one of the first audiences in the world to see this movie. Lili, can you tell us where this film goes next? It's with Showtime Documentary Films. When can the rest of the world see it?
It airs in February 2018. It's opening theatrically during Thanksgiving week here and in Los Angeles. And foreign, it's being released as theatrically. And it premieres in London January 11th.
Well, it's a wonderful finish to our festival. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks especially to Lili Zanuck and Eric Clapton.